Hi, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of SteamLUG Cast. My name is Cheese, and we're recording this on, Friday the 16th of May. And with us we have DerRidda.
Hello!
And Nemoder.
Hey there.
And Leszek Godlewski from, you're working at Nordic Games now.
Yes, that's Nordic Games now. Hi everyone, thanks for having me here.
Thanks very much for joining us. Before we dive in, let's just have a quick recap of what we've been playing lately. DerRidda, what have you been up to?
Always a bit more Dota. Have played some Hammerwatch with my nephew. They updated the campaign and it's a bit more fleshed out, and there's a new class in called Thief, and he shoots his money and I hate him.
He shoots money?
Yes, that means you're getting broke by using your special ability and can't upgrade. It's a terrible class. I don't know what they thought about that.
Interesting.
And I was playing some Necro, the early access. Might dive into that later a bit if you want some opinion on that, because there's a bit to talk about. And I finally finished Broken Sword 1.
Nice. What do you think of that?
I was a bit disappointed in the end, actually. It started off strong, went weak in the end. Like, we ran out of money, let's quickly wrap this up.
Did you play the remastered version with more
Yes.
playable Nico stuff? Yeah.
So, Nemoder, what were you playing?
Played a little bit of Nuclear Dawn. Some Frozen Synapse with that event. We only had a few people, but it was a lot of fun just taking turns. And still playing Factorio.
How about you, Leszek? What sort of stuff have you been playing, if you've had time to play anything?
I was actually kind of afraid of this question because the thing is I don't really have time to play as of late, so I mostly play the game I am working on right now. But apart from that, I do get some from time to time to play some Battlefield 4 recently. That's not a Linux game, but that's like the only thing I get to play recently. Just not as much time as I would like to.
Fair enough. And I've been playing some Guns of Icarus online. We had an event yesterday and a little bit earlier in the week, and that was fun. I managed to try some Battle Block Theatre last night. I did the Spelunky Daily Challenge a couple of days ago, and I've been playing through Kentucky Route Zero Act 3, which we'll probably get to a bit later as well.
Does Kentucky Route Zero work nicely on Linux? Because I've basically bought the game and I'm kind of looking forward to playing it. So I wanted to know if I would need to dual boot to play it or...
I've played it all natively, and it's been okay. I did have... I don't know if you've had the problem with Unity games where sometimes the mouse escapes the window and the renderer freezes.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
It did that to me once when I first launched Act 3, and the game was updated again before I tried it again, so I'm not sure if it was that or whether I just had too much other stuff on my system bogging it down when I was trying to play or not, but I guess keep an eye out for that. Your mouse input in it is a little bit odd, but on the whole, it's pretty solid.
Cool, great, thanks. So I will be playing that soon.
It's good, I can highly recommend it. There's still 2 acts of the game left to go that haven't been made yet, but yeah, it's a brilliant game.
So I hear.
So before we move on to our normal show content, we're just going to have a little chat with Leszek. Do you want to give us a little bit of backstory about yourself, an overview of your personal history, I guess?
Sure. So my name is Leszek Godlewski, as I've been introduced already, and I'm currently at Nordic Games, where I am doing some Linux-related work, which I am not allowed to speak openly about yet, but I think everyone that's here in this channel should like it. Before that, I worked at the Farm 51. It's a Polish game development studio, where I was on the teams for Painkiller, Hell and Damnation, and then Deadfall Adventures. And after I left that company, I still stayed in touch with them, which is what led to the Linux ports of those 2 games. And like before all of that even happened, I always was a tinkering kind of person. So I spent a lot of time modding games. I got into Linux quite early on when I was 14 or 13 even, and yeah, so my first Linux experience was quite rough. It was a Slackware 9.0, I think, so that was pretty ancient, and I pretty much stuck with Linux ever since then, because I think it's a great system for the people who like to tinker with stuff, which is what I am basically.
Nice. And you've done a little bit of lecturing as well?
Yeah, that came out. It was always my experience that there were quite a few people who like dreamt of making games, doing game development, but didn't know how to start. People asking me for what books I would recommend, and that was always a hard question for me to recommend a book, because personally I didn't really read any books to learn programming and so on. So it kind of occurred to me that it makes sense for me to try and to just share what I know, to share the knowledge, and that's kind of how that came about. And the particular initiatives in which I did the game dev lecturing, I think you are referring to that, right? To the game dev school and whatever that I have on LinkedIn. So the Polish game development community is quite tightly integrated, and some people in the community wanted to actually start a game development course for people who wanted to learn how to do game development. And I just volunteered to make some programming lectures, and that's basically how it started out. And I just enjoy sharing knowledge. That's pretty much it.
Awesome. So, Painkiller, Hell, and Damnation, I guess that was your first game that you ported to Linux?
Yes, that's the first commercial thing that I've done for Linux.
And what kind of response did you feel that you got from the community?
The response was overwhelmingly positive, meaning that, it still kind of feels that the community, the Linux community, is kind of starved for quality games. And when they get a promise of a quality game, they really make an effort to appreciate it, if you know what I mean, so that the developer really can feel the appreciation. And I am no longer in charge of the port, as you probably know, but when I was, I tried to kind of stay on the front line, to communicate with the community personally, and the response was very positive. And what I really enjoy is that there are a lot of technical users in the Linux space, so it was quite easy to get logs from crashes and so on. As a programmer, I appreciated that it was quite easy to explain how to gather debug information from problems and so on. So anyway, it was very positive. Of course, it's like in any community, you will always get the trolls, the people who are, ungrateful or something. So there were a few sour moments, but for most of the time, I really enjoyed doing the ports and interacting with the community directly. So it was a very nice experience. And it continues to be. At the moment, I'm not maintaining any port actively in a stage of the life cycle of a product where I communicate with the community daily. But I get some tweets and so on, and yeah, it's been good.
Do you think most of the issues with the game have been worked out? I remember when it first launched, a lot of people were saying that it had some frame rate issues, and was that mostly driver issues that got resolved, or is that pretty well taken care of?
No, I must admit that it hasn't been, fully polished as some of the other parts have. And, I kind of, for reasons I don't want to discuss, my cooperation with the Farm 51 ended, and I am no longer in charge of that, so I cannot really fix that anymore. But yeah, I did my best, and even though I've been using Linux for all these years, doing those two ports was still I still learned a huge lot of things. So there were things that surprised me, both for the positive and for the negative, and I just didn't have the necessary beforehand experience to sort everything out on the first try for the most part. So there is a lot of my fault in the still unsolved bugs, but yeah, I tried my best, and I tackled some. Yeah, I managed to fix some interesting bugs, and there are still some bugs which are unresolved and are beyond my ability to repair, like that infamous total system lockup on AMD driver. And I got AMD people to acknowledge that the bug does exist. I got them to promise a fix, and the fix never happened. So I hope this kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it sounds like though there's enough people that have enjoyed playing it that those bugs aren't stopping anybody from getting into it.
Yeah, when I last played it, it seemed pretty solid, but when we did have our second, and I think our first event, our SteamLUG events, kind of maybe suffered from server-side issues.
Yeah. There were some bugs in the game code which was not related to the port itself, and since then there was a mega patch released for it, and I'm pretty sure it was also released for Linux. And I think it was supposed to fix those issues. There was the map cycle was broken, for instance. So whatever you chose after the first map, it kept returning to that to that initial one. So yeah. In the chat, Vendor B, someone mentioned the Rich Geldreich post about the OpenGL drivers, so I can kind of relate to that. But yeah, so the games are playable, but they are far from, super smooth and stellar. There's still work to be done, and some of that work is kind of actually Epic Games' fault in how they did some of the subsystems in the engine, which are like not very compatible with OpenGL, for instance.
So how old was the engine base for Painkiller? Because I've heard Tripwire talk about the difficulty they had even looking into a potential port for Red Orchestra 2 because of how positively ancient their Unreal 3 version is. And how does Unreal Engine 3 compare in Painkiller?
Well, we used I think it's May 2012 code drop as the base. I mean, we stopped updating to the mainline version of the engine after May 2012. I mean, after that, actually, the July 2012, I think it was like the last major update by Epic to Unreal 3. It stayed pretty stagnant after that. So we were just like, cherry picking individual fixes from upstream. The engine itself, I like Unreal Engine 3 a lot. So, if you were just asking me for an opinion about the engine as of a platform to develop games, I was very happy with it. I enjoyed working with it, and it is pretty solid. But the thing is that the OpenGL renderer, for instance, it was developed with like a limited feature set, and I kind of imagined that it was only tested for some of the example games and not a full-fledged game like I don't know, Unreal Tournament or something, because there were some features which were obviously missing or broken, and they were not the example game like the example games did not really expose those bugs. So I mean, but overall I am quite happy with Unreal Engine, and I cannot wait to put my hands into Unreal 4 and see what can be done with that, especially with Epic's change about how they approach community, and the community beating Epic to porting the editor to Linux. I think that's fantastic things going on.
Absolutely.
The Unreal Engine ports that you did were some of the earliest Linux ports of UE3 games. Did you feel like you had any support from other people who'd worked on existing ports or from Epic, or did you sort of feel like you kind of had to reinvent the wheel and do it all yourself?
First, I wanted to make a shout out to Ryan Gordon, Iculus, because when I started on that, I actually sent him an email asking him about, if he has any tips to share, because before I even started doing that, he had already shipped Dungeon Defenders by that time. So, he obviously had some quite fresh experience for that. And there was some support in the form of the ancient branch of Unreal 3 that Ryan started porting ages ago. I don't know what the exact dates were, but he kind of got the server part ported, and that code was in a separate branch, and it kind of was subject to bit rot. So it was kind of out of date. I couldn't apply it directly, but there was plenty of things that I could draw on. So there was definitely support from Ryan. Epic, not so much. I mean, they did try to help out with individual OpenGL bugs, but in general, it kind of felt that you could really feel that they abandoned. They are maybe not abandoned, but they are moving on to Unreal 4, and especially since this was an unofficial port of the engine, then they made some efforts to support it, but I was quite left to myself on that, on some of the more complex or non-obvious problems. I hope I'm not being like incoherent or something, because if I am, then just tell me, slap me or whatever.
No, that's great. You mentioned that you had some surprises, positive and negative, along the way. Are there any kind of any that stand out in your mind?
I mean, it's geeky and programmer stuff, but it's like, I've been doing some toy applications, toy games or game engines on Linux for some time, but my knowledge of OpenGL and multimedia and Linux in general, it was not nearly as deep as now, and I still think that my knowledge of those things is still shallow compared to Ryan, for instance. But I was surprised by the Valgrind memory debugger, for instance, because it really proved very, very, very useful on numerous occasions. And I knew about this tool before, but I just haven't realized its potential until I actually had a very specific use case for it. And Valgrind is very cool because it sandboxes all the accesses to the memory in your computer. So if you are getting some memory related bugs, Ryan always recommends Valgrind. So now I do so as well, especially if your game has its own memory allocator, because you also instrument Valgrind to watch for invalid memory accesses in your own memory allocator. So that is very good. It helped me track down many bugs. It still does until today, because I still use it, obviously. So that was that. And also the last time I tried API Trace, which is the 3D API draw call tracer, it was not very functional, very buggy, and so on. And then after I also had to fix some OpenGL bugs, it turned out that, hey, it's actually quite useful right now, and it works for the most part. And it still gets annoying, because if you replay an OpenGL trace, then every time you try to look up a trace and at the draw call, it's replaced the entire trace from the beginning, so you get to wait for extended period of times. But in general, it gets the job done. You need some patience, but you get the information that you need, and that's very valuable for me. I admit that I was kind of expecting more things not to work. That's basically the bottom line from my experience with Linux, and I was very pleasantly surprised at many steps how things actually got much more solid and much more coherent and cohesive in general in the Linux space over those last few years, when it seems that I have somehow not been watching. I don't know how that happened. It's I've been living under a rock or something. Just downloading the updates from the Debian repositories, and then suddenly things that I was convinced were still some a long ways useful, they already are. So that's great.
Awesome. So with a couple of Unreal 3 engine ports on the ground now, we spotted a few people here and there saying that supporting Linux with Unreal Engine 3 should be easy. How would you respond to those sorts of comments? This is from users.
This also comes from me, because in my last year's presentation at Digital Dragons, it's a Polish game dev conference, I said that it's actually on a slide, even if someone wanted to quote me, that the relative engineering cost of Linux port is low. And I still maintain that opinion, because if you consider that there is a huge overlap in what you need to do between Linux, Mac OS X, and mobile. So if you have a ready-made engine like Unreal 3, you already get a lot of engineering out of the way, a lot of engineering work, and it's not even in the direct things like writing code for Unix-like systems or something like that. It's the value is also in the fact that the game logic, the game mechanics code is very cleanly separated from the platform it's running on. That is a huge value in itself. It's and now I am at my current project. I'm also working with a multi-platform engine, and it really goes to show how how clean and good design of the game engine, how it pays off. Because I really didn't touch the game code at all. Like the game logic, the game mechanics was up until now. I didn't even change a single character, and when I just filled in the missing building blocks of the engine, it all started working. I mean, there were rendering glitches and so on, but the game was instantly playable. So if you have a ready-made engine like Unreal Engine 3, it's easy to port to Linux compared to a situation where your engine is not multi-platform. So that is definitely true, at least in some aspects. But the thing with specifically the thing with Unreal Engine 3 is that I think the biggest problem actually with it is the shader system, which is like totally unfit for use with OpenGL. I talked about this in my Digital Dragons talk this year. In the ports that I've made, the artists at the Farm 51 created tons and tons of different materials, which resulted in tons and tons of different shaders. And all those shaders, the OpenGL shader model causes a lot of data duplication and redundancy, and having loads of different shaders in different combinations is bad for you, and it's bad for the engine. So yeah, you are likely to stumble on the shader obstacles, on the shader obstacle if you try porting an Unreal Engine 3 title without refactoring some parts of the renderer. And some of the trolling I received for the ports by of the games by TF51 was that, hey, Ryan Gordon ported Dungeon Defenders and it didn't have those problems. And the only defense that I have is that Dungeon Defenders was a much smaller game in scope. They probably used much fewer materials that TF51 used, and it's the reason why those problems were not so evident as in the games that I ported. And it's a question of the content, of how the content for the game was created. And I admit that I haven't fixed it, but yeah, I just didn't have the chance to do it.
It's also not like Dungeon Defenders doesn't have its problems of its own at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it's perfect, but probably should have specified that I'm referring to this specific issue of the long loading times and the fact that initially, before I fixed that, the game would also stutter during streaming of levels, and this was because streaming, which was supposed to happen in the background, was actually causing the foreground process of the game to stall, waiting for the GLSL shaders to compile. So unless your driver was caching those shaders, you were getting the stuttering, mid gameplay. And that was it made for a very poor user experience, and I understand why people were frustrated with that. But this is where the difference is coming from, that maybe Dungeon Defenders wasn't using the background streaming, so they didn't get this, and probably they had less content, a fewer shaders, a smaller number of shaders to load. So maybe that's why the game does not suffer as much from the loading times and responsiveness issues as Painkiller does. That's what I meant.
Yeah, it's fair enough. So, as we mentioned earlier, you're working at Nordic Games now. What sort of work are you anticipating doing there? Are you doing game development or game porting?
I'm doing game porting currently, obviously, and I've done some things already for Nordics which are not exactly Linux related, and I might be doing also something else in the future for them. But currently it's Linux and it's porting, and I'm sorry, but I cannot reveal what the title is yet. But
that's okay.
Yeah, NDAs and all that. But I personally think that it's a good game. Yeah, and I enjoy working on it a lot, and I hope that you will also enjoy it.
So is that a in-house developed thing at Nordic Games, or is it something that they're publishing for someone else?
I want to answer that, but I won't, because this might give you too much of a tip as to what the subject is. So
fair enough.
I prefer to make no comments.
More generally, in the future, do you think that you'll be working on a sort of third-party stuff?
Actually, I do not. I personally, I don't have a plan, that extends as far in the future. I should probably ask my boss about that. What he intends to, when he intends to do when the current project finishes. But it's Nordic Games is mostly a publishing company, so I kind of expect that I will either be porting some other stuff that Nordic is publishing from third parties, or I might actually be moved to a internal studio or something. I don't know if you've heard about this, but Nordic Games actually launched their own studio. I mean, they now own a studio. We now own a studio. Yeah, because I'm part of the company. We now own a studio in Munich, in Germany, and so I might just end up working there.
Yeah, that was. I think that was the main reason I was asking to see if you had any feeling for what would be happening in that front. But either way, that's still good.
Well, yeah, let me just tell you this. The very fact that that Nordic Games decided to hire me, I think it really speaks for their intent as for publishing games for Linux. So
Yeah,
I think Nordic Games has the back of the Linux community in that regard. And I'm speaking more generally, not even about what I'm doing personally, about what all the other people at Nordic are doing as well. There are some things which are not yet announced and so on, but yeah, I think that Nordic has the back of the Linux community when it comes to gaming. And the studio, if anyone is interested in the name, I think it's called Grimlore Studios or Grimlore Games. I'm not really sure right now, but I will check it and I will post the link in the chat.
awesome. On that note, do you think in the sort of medium to long term that that publishers will pick up the Linux porting role? Do you think that's where things are likely to be heading?
To be honest, I have no idea, and that's a tough question, and I kind of always this, and also people asking me if it's financially viable to sell games for Linux, because frankly, I'm an engineer, I'm a programmer, I'm not a business person, and I don't take much interest in the business side of things. But what I expect is that it will take, maybe a few months, a dozen months, or maybe 2 years, and then we shall see how the future of SteamOS plays out. And I think that how SteamOS performs will determine the legacy and the destiny of the Linux gaming market. So I kind of expect that what I do expect that will definitely happen is that the market space for freelance Linux porters will dramatically shrink. I think that Ryan Gordon is not going to lose his job because he's probably the best. I also think that Ethan Lee, Libby Bible, yeah, that's a great nickname. I love it. So I also think that he will easily keep his job. He shouldn't be afraid of not having clients. But for people like me, I think that the market will, like me, meaning with the comparable amount of experience, I think either studios and publishers will go for in-house porting. If SteamOS succeeds, then they will get porters of their own within the companies. Or SteamOS will fail and Linux gaming will go back to being a niche. So yeah. So anyway, I think it's not if anyone is thinking of starting of doing freelance porting, I think they should do it now while there is still time and while there are the number of clients is actually increasing, because for the last few months I've regularly been getting offers from people trying to get me out of Nordic Games to work on their super cool game, and so there are quite a few clients for Linux porters out there right now. So if you want to do this, then it's the right time. I think it's probably the best time to do the ports now if you want to be a freelance porter. But I think it's the days are numbered. I don't know how many days there are left, but I think they are numbered, and it will play out in I think at most 2 years. So we shall see how SteamOS performs.
Well, my hope would be that a lot of these companies that may have picked up IP from other developers that are no longer together, that maybe they would want to port some of their older titles, and maybe that will provide some opportunities.
Yeah, it's actually GOG.com. They are actually now recruiting Linux people because they obviously made the announcement a couple months ago, I think already, that they are also going to support their game, the entire catalog on Linux, or maybe not the entire catalog, but they are dedicated to providing Linux support for some of their titles at least. So GOG.com is definitely doing that. They actually approached me as well. Yeah, so I think there is a lot of potential. and it might realize or it might not. Out of my sympathy for Linux, because I like Linux, I wouldn't keep it as my primary operating system if I didn't like it, and I like my operating system. I want to play games on it, and I really wish that I could play all the games I want without having to dual boot to Windows. So yeah, I'm not exactly. I don't have an emotional investment in seeing SteamOS succeed, but it would be nice. I would really appreciate it if Linux gaming was here to stay, and I think it has a potential to happen.
Yeah.
While it's all our hopes and fears what SteamOS might do in the future, hasn't the past also kind of shown that Linux gaming isn't quite as niche even without it? Even while SteamOS is just a buzzword, until now we have grown with Humble and Steam and done it on our own, while SteamOS is just looming in the background, maybe to come out in the future.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I'm perfectly sure that. Okay, so maybe I think that Linux is a viable market space already for the indie games, because indies tends to use some ready-made engines, and they care about the small revenue, compared to the big platforms like the consoles and so on. But for the big players, they need big money. So for instance, I don't see EA or Activision moving into Linux unless SteamOS goes big. So this is what I mean. And yeah, you're probably right that Humble Bundle was probably the turning point of Linux gaming in general. So yeah, you're probably right. I agree. But anyway, I'm not a business person, so you might just want to take all of my opinions on this matter with a pinch of salt.
It's interesting to speculate about where things might go. Yeah, nobody can see the future, so yeah. One of our other co-hosts, John Drinkwater, has asked if we can ask what your favorite game that you've played over the past 12 months is, and if you had the chance to port anything, would it be that game or would it be something else?
Tricky question, tricky. Let me think. I'm a kind of gun nut, and I like playing airsoft. I'm interested in the military, so to be honest, my favorite game for the last 12 months was Battlefield 4, I think. So if I could port that, I would be super happy, especially, if some other unlikely things happen in the market, like AMD opening up Mantle, getting an implementation of that running on Linux. That would be super cool. If they founded a non-profit organization for the, like running the specification of Mantle and so on. So that would be like my dream scenario, to kind of to do that. And seeing Mantle adopted by other GPU vendors would also be super cool, but I'm not really sure that's gonna happen because of politics, obviously. But yeah, so Battlefield 4 is like the game that I played, like for gameplay, because when I wanted to, I get those moods, and sometimes I want to, shoot things and do the more classical gaming thing. But, I actually tried it was only in the last 12 months that I played The Walking Dead. So that was a great experience.
Which one was that? The Telltale one?
The Walking Dead by Telltale Games. Yeah. So that was my second favorite game. So, and I actually played it on Linux, not natively, but through Wine, and it worked quite nicely. So yeah, that I guess that kind of sort of counts as as Linux gaming. And as for porting that, I think Telltale Games can handle the porting themselves, especially since their engine seems to be, already suitable for mobile games, for mobile platforms. So yeah, if anyone from Telltale Games is listening, as I said before, the engineering cost of a Linux port is relatively low. So since you already have a mobile port, you may want to do that.
And I promise I would buy it.
Yeah, well, they've mentioned in the past that Linux is something that they've been considering, but no commitments there, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I always take those announcements from people, that we are considering Linux and so on. That's just that's usually there just to make people feel better, because it's like Ubisoft, who have been saying that they are considering Linux for gaming for as long as I can remember, and they've never done anything. They never released anything for Linux. So when I hear it from other people, obviously because when I work on the ports, and when I say that I'm working on the port, I am doing that. But when I hear such announcements from other developers, I'm always a bit skeptical. So. But the thing is that I'm pretty sure that Telltale Games, they have their engine is suitable for porting, and it's just a question of allocating the engineering resources, like 2 guys over 3 months or something like that, and just getting this thing done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might just be that Telltale Games are just stretched too thin to do that at the moment. So they don't have the manpower or whatever. So we'll see. I actually am keeping my fingers crossed that they do that, because it's a great game and I would like to enjoy it on Linux. The Walking Dead, of course.
Same here. I'd love to see some of their older titles as well. I'm really into like Sam and Max and the Monkey Island ones, Strong Bad and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, previously, prior to that, I think they did a it might have been on Reddit. I can't remember exactly where it was, where they said that Linux support was something that was on the radar for them. But prior to that, they'd always been no, we're not looking at doing Linux. So it was a slight change of tune, even if it doesn't necessarily indicate anything. It's nice to see the recognition, even if it ends up being that kind of dismissive thing.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can definitely feel that there is an acknowledgement
Right.
of Linux as a gaming platform, that it's viable, just for like for playing games themselves. So. So that is a nice warm and fuzzy feeling, because it used to be like a dream of mine to port games to Linux. My priorities in life kind of changed since that happened. It's not the number one thing I would like to do with my life right now, but it's still very high. And, it did give me a nice, warm and fuzzy feeling in my stomach when I arrived in Seattle and went for Steam Developer Days. And, it was nice that people were actually seriously considering Linux as a gaming platform. This is a nice thing that there is a trend for that in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. And it was fantastic to see Valve, not only having SteamOS and porting their own games and stuff, but Steam Dev Days did feel like it had this big undercurrent or undertone that suggested that they felt that Linux support was definitely things that people should be paying attention to.
Exactly.
So on that note, did any of you guys have anything you want to ask or add?
No.
I think he covered everything.
Yeah, it was quite conclusive.
Is there anything else you'd like to pass on to our listeners, Leszek?
Let me think. Or maybe any questions from the chat, because I wasn't really following, because I was too busy thinking about what to say.
It's okay. It's easy to get distracted if you end up reading the chat.
Yeah. I see someone mentioning that they doubt Mantle will succeed. I kind of share that sentiment. OpenGL and DX12 absorbing the key details that are being used to market Mantle. I'm not really sure, because the thing about Mantle is that it gives you very low-level control over the GPU, and this is something that neither Direct3D or OpenGL really does provide on such low level. Because if you program graphics for consoles, you get to control very basic things, for like allocation of memory for textures and so on, which is conveniently hidden away from you if you use one of the desktop APIs. Yeah, just saw the question in the chat, cheese. But anyway, so the thing is that Mantle is supposed to give the programmer that kind of control, the low-level control over the graphics on the desktop as well. And I think that I haven't really seen what Direct3D 12 does, like the code yet. Just didn't have time to look at the publicly available presentations and documents. But from what OpenGL is doing, it's not the same direction. It's orthogonal to that. I would say that the development of OpenGL is going in an orthogonal direction to what Mantle is trying to do. So it's not conflicting, but it's a bit different. So. But I mainly do not see Mantle succeeding because of politics, because obviously it will. I really doubt that it will succeed unless all the other vendors adopt it, and I do not see that happening. Nvidia has, while I like them for quality Linux drivers, I don't like their policy with regard to secrecy and code sharing and so on. Thoughts on OpenGL versus D12? I think, well, you probably all heard about the recent rants from Valve's Rich Geldreich about OpenGL, and I really can relate to everything that he's complained about. So OpenGL, I think it's still not too late to save OpenGL, if you know what I mean. But I think that radical redevelopment of the API is in order, and getting rid of all those craft that accumulated over the years. And D12 is D12. Direct3 D12 is obviously an attempt by Microsoft to respond to Mantle. It's also quite telling of Microsoft that all of the policies lately seems to be reactive. They don't really come in with something new. They just respond to what everyone else does. So I kind of think that it's simply it's a response to AMD making a bold move with Mantle.
Aikido design or development.
Can you repeat?
Aikido design or development, the Japanese martial arts where you react to what your enemy does, pretty much.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you received the Steam Machine. Do you use it for dev? Somebody already linked the article, but I actually wrote also a blog post which you can access from going to that link and then going to my profile about using Steam Machine as a dev kit. And the way I use it is that I build the binaries on my main development machine, and then just share the binaries over SSH FS with the Steam Machine, and just launch it remotely via SSH. So yeah, I use the Steam Machine for development. Okay, so any more questions? I'm trying to skim through the chat. Steam Dev Days and you good feelings in your stomach, like meeting and talking to the people there. Yeah, it's like I said, you could the atmosphere was that, I mean, there were quite a few people who were cynical or downright trolling about the future of Linux gaming, but there were some people who were like genuinely enthusiastic. And why I'm afraid that SteamOS will become to Linux gaming what Android is to let's say Linux mobile phones, if you know what I mean. And it was still a nice atmosphere. And what I meant by this Android analogy is that Android is no longer, in the consciousness of most people, it's no longer Linux, right? And even though it has the Linux kernel at its heart and so on, and I kind of expect this to happen to SteamOS as well. So it will be Linux, and it's based on Debian and so on, but it will probably become controlled and contained enough to kind of be more like a Linux-based OS than Linux itself.
We hope that people still see it as Linux, though, and with Steam offering Linux support that people have running on multiple distros and not just SteamOS, so maybe there's a chance that perception is going to hang around.
Yeah, I would love it to stay like that, but I'm not sure if you have noticed, but I've recently launched the Steam client after a long period of not even opening it, and I've noticed that they renamed the Linux segments of the library to SteamOS plus Linux. And I actually I can bet that at one point they will just rename it.
And disappear.
Yeah, they will just rename it to SteamOS. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that happened, was it late last year or early this year?
Yeah,
I think early this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that. It's just like it's been. It actually was today. I haven't launched the Steam client for a while because of reasons, and then it just hit me in the face that it says SteamOS plus Linux, and yeah, I think the direction is that they are just going to have an even ever tighter grip on SteamOS as a thing, and I think they will still support all the other flavors of all the other distros of Linux, but it will be kind of if you want it to work, it's unsupported, but if it works, we're happy to sell you our games. I think it's going to end up like that, unfortunately, because this is what companies do. It's rare that companies will want to support an ecosystem which they don't fully control. Okay, so any more questions or?
Looks like things are slowing down there. We might wrap up that portion of the cast. Thank you very much for giving us your time there.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to have been invited. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Do you think you might hang around, or are you keen to disappear?
I'm very sorry, but I think I should be going. So thank you very much again, and yeah, I think I will just hang out some other time.
Yeah, no problems.
If you know, even just to listen.
Sure.
So thanks again.
Thanks very much.
I hope I did not bore you to death.
Oh, it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, so thanks, and well, talk to you later, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
See ya.
So moving on to SteamLUG community stuff, just give a quick recap of our past events and a couple of the upcoming events. We had a postcast Dota 2 event following the last episode. I didn't get to hang around for that. I was trying to troubleshoot our Mumble server problems, but I think everybody hopped over to Tele42's Mumble server, and I spotted that a bunch of people were playing.
Thanks to Tele for that, by the way.
Yeah, big thanks for offering that use of that server to us and looking after people there. We had our Nuclear Dawn release celebration event, which went for many hours. I had to duck off early. We more than filled one server. Did both of you guys manage to make that one?
I was in and out for some of it, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with a few games there.
No, I wasn't around because I have to admit that I don't really like it that much as a game. Not the board, just the game itself.
Fair enough.
I think the game's got a lot of potential. We did have a lot of players on during the event, and for the most part, it went pretty well. Some people started exploiting some map bugs and things, which was unfortunate, but besides that, it was a lot of fun.
As you mentioned earlier, we had our Frozen Synapse event, and we also had a Counter-Strike Source event, which I hear that you did very well on, DerRidda.
Yes, it's not so that I did really well, it's more that I have over 1,000 hours logged into that game, and it's just like riding a bicycle. And most people in this community don't seem to play Counter-Strike all that much. So, and there's a lot of... the skill difference makes it all in Counter-Strike.
It does seem that way, yeah.
A lot of people waiting for CSGO as well, I'm sure.
It is better, and as soon as that's out, I will completely veto every Counter-Strike Source event. You will only be playing Counter-Strike Go from that point forward, because it is so much better.
On the horizon...
So yeah, what...
Oh, sorry.
No, I was asking about what events were coming up.
Well, since you asked, we have Left 4 Dead 2 event coming up after the cast now. We've got a Team Fortress 2 event tomorrow, a Sanctum 2 event next week. Depending upon the state of the beta, for that we may switch over to something like Fists of Frags maybe as a fallback.
Fistful of Frags.
Yes, sorry, Fistful. Yeah, it's kind of not 100% sure whether Sanctum 2 is quite ready to run an event for. It's fun, but it's still got some rough edges. And we've also got a Gear Up event happening a bit later on as well, so that should be fun. The devs have said they're continuing to work on the game. They're not sure if they're going to be able to fix many Linux-specific things, but they're glad that we're running an event, which is cool. Other community stuff, I wrote a first impressions article on Crypt of the Necrodancer, just kind of talking about my experiences playing it, because I've pre-ordered and managed to get access to the alpha version, which it's not too bad. A couple of things like gamepad support is not quite as solid as it seems to be on Windows, and there's custom music stuff isn't quite working right at the moment. But yeah, I think it's a pretty awesome game.
Yeah, I saw you stream it a bit. It definitely looks interesting, but I don't quite get the mechanics yet. How do you avoid enemy attacks? Are they just on the accented beats or whatever?
Yeah, the enemies, you and the enemies can only move on the beat, and some enemies won't move on every beat, or they'll have particular types of movement patterns. So they might move in one direction, or they might only move diagonally, or they might only move when you're facing away from them. And it's those behaviors, learning to understand and predict those that allows you to avoid taking damage.
How do the attacks work? Is it like you move into their square, or is it a separate thing?
No, you just move into their square.
Oh, okay. That certainly looks like an interesting take on dungeon crawling in general.
Yeah, I'm pretty blown away. I wasn't quite 100% sure. Like DerRidda says, you just watch it and it's not exactly clear how how it all comes together. But when you're actually playing, you find that you get a feel for how the enemies work, and then once you get into a bit of a rhythm, it really it's really fun.
Going to have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah,
But I guess you can't get into the alpha anymore for Linux.
they've suspended pre-orders. I think they've got a much larger pool of testers than they were originally hoping for, and they want to finish up the game a little bit more before opening it up. But they are doing sort of regular giveaways, or I don't know how regular they are, but they have been doing giveaways since they closed pre-orders. I reached out to them on Twitter, and they said that they weren't sure what their plans for pre-release availability was going to be moving forward. Some of it depends upon whether they think they need a bigger pool of testers.
It's interesting to close your doors when people are throwing more money at you than you expected.
It is, but I can kind of understand that if there's an experience that they want people to have that they haven't quite got there, that if they want everybody's first experience to be that polished game, then I guess I can understand slowing down at least the number of people getting on board early. But that's due for release sometime this year. They also apparently have been talking about doing a Kickstarter campaign for custom Crypt of the Necrodancer themed dance mats, because the game has support for dance mats. Mim has one, and I gave that a quick try the other day. Absolutely awful at it, but for people who are into that sort of thing, that's pretty cool. But yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that one. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we have a Fistful of Frags, a SteamLUG server, thanks to Space Pope. You can find details of that on our servers page on our website.
Seems like it's one of our more popular servers again.
Yeah, it's nice to see some activity on there. It's pretty cool. And the SteamLUG bot in our IRC channel now has a couple of new commands. You can ask it for a time conversion and when a particular user was last seen, if they've set stuff up for that. And it's also currently relaying new Linux titles as they appear on the store, which is pretty cool. So thanks to for sorting that one out. I also had time to write an article on The Fall, which is a game that we've mentioned a couple of times on the cast. And I talk about sort of my experiences as being a supporter of crowdfunding projects in general, as well as the game itself. Looking forward to seeing that released on June the 1st.
Nice. And
Corbin has done a summary of a German Linux and free software conference that he went to a little bit earlier. Might have been last week, I think, called Linux Tag in Germany. And it's a pretty decent rundown. If anybody's keen to check that out, definitely do so. It touched a little bit on gaming stuff in the Is Wine Still Relevant talk. But yeah, it's nice to see activity happening there. And great to see a community write-up happen as well.
Cool. One thing I wanted to mention, last week I did talk a little bit about Factorio releasing a new trailer, and it's cool to see, just within the last week, they've sold more copies of the game than they had the entire previous year. So it's always fun to watch an indie developer get something after a lot of hard work.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I hope it was thanks to us.
Well, it must have been.
Must have been.
Totally.
Probably the audiocast helped a little bit too, but...
A little. It's supporting,
Yeah.
So, what has WAF been doing over the last 2 weeks?
Well, we've had some new Steam survey stats, I think, or at least we didn't talk about them last time. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of don't see any significant movement, in the distribution of platforms. It's all like the biggest change is less than 1%, I think. And just without having a high confidence value and not having details on how the sampling is conducted, it's hard to know if those small fluctuations actually mean anything. But on Linux specific stuff, there's been a huge jump towards Ubuntu 14.04, obviously. But that was, I think, twice as big as the drop that 13.10 had corresponding. So it's interesting to see.
Yes, some people might have skipped 1310, at least that's what I've heard from some people. They were not that happy with 1310 and just decided to wait for 1404 and just drift over that period where they don't get any updates for 1304.
A lot of people are using the LTS release too, that it goes quite a ways back.
Yeah, but I still think this is the most interesting data in that survey. It has nothing to do with gaming, just with how good Linux users are on keeping their system upgraded or how good the ecosystem is in telling them to upgrade. You won't see anything like still people using operating systems as old as Windows XP on Linux. Just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I guess one other thing to note on the stat stuff is that, and John points this out, is that even though these are very, very small numbers that may not actually mean anything within the context of the survey, it is nice to see a positive number against Linux compared to some of the recent survey results, which have been dropping by 0.06% or whatever.
You can thank my mother. That Linux survey popped up on her machine.
Ah, nice.
On that Steam survey. So that makes all the difference.
Well, it's funny, I saw a bunch of Linux users say that they'd received prompts for this last survey. And just as I saw someone say that, I fired up my Mac and got a prompt on that. Whoops. So we've had a couple of client updates. There was an input fix pushed out for Ubuntu 14.04 users and some big picture mode performance improvements. Apparently that's using a little bit less in the way of system resources when you're playing a game.
Well, still sitting on the beta client, and there are some more streaming and big picture improvements, but yeah, not really paying attention to the stable upgrades. I don't know how many people here on the beta branch still and how many are on the stable client.
I stay pretty up to date with the beta myself.
I normally like to hang on the stable client just so I can get a feel for what's affecting normal users and so that I don't have to restart the client so often. But I think I'm on the beta at the moment.
Yeah, people in the chat also say they are on the beta branch, so seems to be quite popular still. Linux users can't have stable, gotta go beta.
It really hasn't had too many problems for me. I mean, as far as usability, some of the extra features like the streaming might have an issue now and then, but just as far as running games, it's been fine.
There's been a new Source SDK update, which doesn't seem to have any Linux-specific fixes, but is likely to break mods as that's rolled out to the parent games. And the Dota 2 International 4 thing is happening now, or is about to happen, or something. I don't know much about it. DerRidda, you play Dota. Tell us.
It's currently in the American qualifiers, and the compendium is out, and it's breaking in all the money in the world. I don't know, it's over 6 million already. Is it? I need to look. It's a large number, and it's getting even larger. Oh, it's on $5,281,604 US at the moment. And yeah, the compendium is quite cool because you get lots of new stuff that are useful for everybody, almost like Kickstarter stretch goals. There are new game modes, new music. Some stuff is exclusive to the people who bought the compendium, but like the game modes, of course, and the new matchmaking.
Interesting.
Everybody gets to have. So that's quite cool. There's a crowd benefit in there. I don't know what John is ranting about here. If he wanted to rant, he should have been here. Listen to that, John. So I think it's all in all quite positive, but there might be some wailing involved on the compendium.
We also had the blog posts from Rich Goldreich that we mentioned earlier. I haven't had a chance to read them. Have either of you guys had a chance to look at them? Because if not, we'll just skip over.
I skimmed through them a little bit. A lot of it sounded like just somebody coming from doing a lot of DirectX work and trying to figure out how to make it work in OpenGL and getting frustrated.
I don't know, it's really highly technical. If you are a graphics programmer, you will probably understand it and can tell if he has a point, but I'm not that sophisticated at all, so I don't know. I looked at it, interesting, I don't understand it. Moving on.
Fair enough. So, moving on to general gaming news, it looks like community developers have beat internal Epic porting efforts to get the Unreal Engine 4 editor support running on Linux. Apparently it's still very early these days, but interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, you should totally look at that image in the tweet we have linked to in the show notes. It's totally casual, like, how's the state of the Linux editor? Oh, there is no one working it. Do you want the patches to make it working? Yes. So that's how it went, apparently. Yeah, just.
I wonder what sort of recognition those Linux porters or the people involved with doing that are going to get, if any?
I do not know.
Might be enough just to get more people developing with their port.
Well, that definitely benefits the engine, and benefits Epic. And I suppose if those devs are using that functionality, then that definitely benefits them as well. As we mentioned earlier, Kentucky Route Zero Act 3 is now out. Yeah, so definitely if you're into played the game before or have been keen on checking it out, there's quite a lot of content in there now. And yeah, really enjoyable game. We'll probably be doing that for Game Club at some stage soon as well.
I really like the first act. I haven't actually got around to playing the second one yet.
If you buy it, do you buy a season pass?
Yeah, it's just one price gets you the entire game. You can't buy the acts separately.
Oh, nice.
But Act 3 features a song, which is new. I haven't seen anything like that in the game so far. And just the same sort of interesting character-oriented stuff. Oh, there's a sort of a, I don't know if you'd really call it a mini-game. You might call it an exercise in patience. You might call it an exploration or commentary on sort of management simulators, like text-based management simulators. It's kind of interesting. But it's a fantastic game. There's been a new Assault Android Cactus update, which brings in a new character and a new boss, and a couple of redressed levels and a few gameplay adjustments. It's pretty cool. One of the bigger content updates that we've seen for the game. The new character has like a railgun, which has like really long reach, but a long reload time as well. So it creates a very different kind of style of play than you get from the other characters.
So we can touch on that again because it says Dota 2, the international 4 qualifiers are active now, and for North America, Team Liquid has qualified. If you're interested in that, you probably already know it.
It looks like Killing Floor 2 has been confirmed for Linux port.
Yes, and the real interesting nugget of information here is that it's not done by any kind of outside porter, but that Terry Hendricks II of the original Iculus crew is now working at Tripwire and is doing their Linux and SteamOS related work. So that's going to be a proper, fully supported in-house port for all of those that were disappointed with Tripwire's previous ports, like Killing Floor, the original one, because that isn't that well supported, we all know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that happens.
Yeah, it definitely looks like quite a sweet game. I mean, if you like the original Killing Floor, this will really tickle your fancy. It looks like more of the same in more gorgeous, better weapon handling, and hopefully an overall improved game.
An existing game that I spotted recently on Steam Early Access has just recently gotten Linux support. It's Crowdscape, which is this sort of racing flying game. Kind of gameplay-wise, might be similar to Distance.
I haven't really paid attention to that, so enlighten me if you can.
I hadn't really heard of it before, but basically you drive this transformer type thing that can drive or can fly around a racetrack. The racetracks are procedurally generated, so you've got sort of fairly large range of diversity between tracks, or unlimited diversity apparently. And they're usually structured in a way that by using flying and driving together, you can achieve better speeds than you would otherwise. For example, if you choose to drive through a loop-the-loop, that's going to be slower than just flying around it. It looks kind of neat. It's got this interesting, low poly stylized look and feel to it. I'll definitely be trying to find some time to check that out.
So, and there's now a Stanley Parable announcer pack for Dota 2, and it's quite good sounding. If I had the money to waste on that, I would. It's awesomely condescending, just like the real deal, if you've played Stanley Parable or looked at some kind of Let's Play. And yeah, it's probably not for those guys who think too seriously of all the Dota 2 games, because at some point you will hear something that makes you feel belittled.
I imagine that that's exactly what you want if you would buy that.
Yes, if you want that, go get it. It's quite awesome.
So, Tesla Effect, which is a sequel to, or a successor to, or something, the Tex Murphy games from Yore has apparently launched, and Linux client is apparently on the way soon for people who are into those. I think we have confirmation there in chat that it's an FMV game like the originals, which is interesting to see. Modern take on that sort of stuff. I haven't really seen any recent FMV games. Have you guys?
I don't think so.
No, why would anyone still do FMV? It was horrible when it was new. Anyone remember Gabriel Knight 2?
Yeah, I have to say, I found it very difficult to get into them.
Yeah, but I guess it works for something as intentionally campy as Tex Murphy. I mean, it doesn't try to be completely serious. It revels in its silliness, I think.
Clay also...
Clay?
Yes, Clay. Or Clay? Clay. Developers of Don't Starve recently announced that they would be adding multiplayer support to Don't Starve.
That should make the game a lot more interesting.
Might have a reason to pick it up again. But I wonder how the failure state is handled. That will be quite interesting. Do you know any of that yet?
The details are pretty light on the ground at the moment, or at least when I last looked. There weren't really any details. I think they said they were aiming for summer, maybe, for getting people access to it. But I imagine that, like the game itself, it's probably a case of getting access to early versions of these features, and they'll be iterated over time with progressive updates and stuff. But yeah, I'm interested to see how things will go. And it's an interesting thing in that lots of people have, for a long time, demanded Linux support, and Clay have always said that it was something that they didn't have planned or didn't want to do, and so they've got to deal with community repercussions of changing tune like that, which is fine. Apparently, everyone's been surprisingly calm about it, which is good. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but for some single player games, there seems to be a strong I don't know whether it's really like a group of people or just you end up with a couple of people who say, this game is crap because it doesn't have multiplayer.
There's certainly a lot of people that prefer multiplayer games and just won't look at anything that's single player.
But if a game hasn't been designed to have multiplayer from the ground up, that makes retroactively implementing it potentially a lot harder.
Yeah, and that does make sense for especially story-based games where you just can't have a narrative with multiple people running around.
Yeah,
I think it'll work for Don't Starve. I mean, they'll have to change a little bit of how the spawning system and all that works, but the core concept of very much like Minecraft. I mean, you could easily have it cooperative play.
But yeah, it's kind of good to see that they believe they can do it and are keen to take it on. So that's really positive. Humble Bundle have been going nuts. In addition
Incredibly so.
In addition to their current weekly bundles, I can't remember what the last one was, but the current one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 titles. Is it? So platformers and stuff, which nothing new to Linux there that I can see, but they're all good games.
And they've all been in previous bundles, I think.
Yeah.
And they're also doing the daily bundle, which is basically just a rebundle of their Humble Indie Bundle number 8. But definitely some very good games in there, so if you missed that earlier one, then I would recommend getting it.
Yeah, definitely check that out. It will be over by the time that the archive goes out. But apparently for 2 weeks they're pushing out a new bundle every day. This is the...
We are 4 days in?
Yeah, we are 4 days in, yeah. This is the second one that is a reassembly of a previous bundle. But we've also seen the Deep Silver rebundle, which was a recap of the Humble Deep Silver bundle, I think. The Outer Space bundle, which had things like Kinetic Void and a couple of other titles. I think there was only 1 or 2 Linux games in that one. And
Kinetic Void and X3, the latest, I think.
That's right. And yesterday's one was the Banner Saga game plus comics, which currently doesn't have Linux support.
Banner Saga, I'm a bit surprised about that. This has been out for quite some time now. It was one of the earlier Kickstarter craze games, got funded quite well, but where is the Linux versions? I mean, has anyone backed it? I would be pissed by now. I'm not, because I didn't back it.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm surprised that I haven't seen people getting cranky about it.
So this Harmonic in chat says he has backed it. How do you feel about that thing? So yeah, the game has been out for about a month, but like that combat demo has been out for much longer, hasn't it?
Well, fingers crossed that we'll see forward movement on that front.
Indeed.
Oh, it's never getting ported.
Only the combat demo isn't getting ported, or Banner Saga in its entirety.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well, interesting. But let's move on to new Steam releases that you can actually play on Linux.
You can play them today. So, anything in the list here that catches your eyes, Nemoder and DerRidda?
Yeah, I was looking at Fistful of Frags. I was a big fan of Smoking Guns, which had a little more of a Counter-Strike feel to it, but of course with the Western setting. And Fistful of Frags is a little more casual, more like Team Fortress, I guess, where you just kind of spawn in and run around. But same style, all Western weapons and knives and things, which it seems like it'll be a pretty fun game to just kind of jump in and screw around for a while.
Well, also played Fistful of Frags, didn't quite get into it. It's a bit too clumsy as far as the movement field and the weapons as well. You sometimes stand in front of somebody and crosshair perfectly spot on, still miss every shot. Like typical Source engine hit detection problems. And overall the movement feels way too slow for that kind of game. But it seems like people are enjoying it, and I don't want to detract from anybody else's enjoyment.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people playing it.
Yeah, it's definitely a different style of game. It's if you're used to Counter-Strike and all that, it's a lot harder to get into.
So, anything you saw, Cheese?
I was given Battle Block Theatre, which I had to play through last night. That seems like a fun multiplayer platformer. I mean, the object is to collect some crystals and go to the exit, but the game provides you with lots of opportunities to push and hit and be unfriendly with your co-op partners. I haven't had a chance to play it multiplayer yet, but it looks like it's going to be a lot of silly fun on that front. I've also been playing a little bit of hack and slash. Haven't had a lot of time to spend on that. But what I've played so far is it's pretty good. The early part of the game is more about teaching you how to use the tools and getting familiar with them as you play. And then apparently later on in the game, it's going to open out and become a lot more driven by the users, changing the game's behavior themselves. But where I've been playing so far, it's more just bringing up a menu which shows all the entity properties that can be adjusted. So it hasn't been hugely dynamic, but I've got the debug hat, which shows you like view cones and trigger points and a whole bunch of bits and pieces that apparently that's all stuff that they exposed whilst editing, whilst creating the game. As part of their authoring tools and debug tools themselves. It's kind of interesting to see those kinds of aspects in a release game.
So does it feel more like a sandbox game, or is it more like a puzzle game?
At the moment, it feels more like a puzzle game, but less directed than you would imagine most puzzle games to feel. So it's kind of does have that aspect of you
kind of go where you want. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of linear, but it and you kind of explore the environment to work out where you have to go. But yeah, you sort of take your own path a little bit in some places.
I would also like to point out that you can now buy Paragon on Steam. We have talked about that in a previous cast when it was greenlit. It's a pretty interesting looking space game, so if you have a niche that only space games can scratch, you should definitely take a look at it. It's very Elite inspired, I would say, and many others say so as well.
Yeah, it's nice to see lots of space games going on these days. I was really happy to see that as someone who does have that space game itch.
Indeed, it's actually so many now that I don't even know which one I should pick. That's why I haven't bought one in a while.
Yeah, I know that feeling, especially with games like the X series out there, which look like they are a huge time investment.
They are.
If you want to get into those, don't really know how to get into to set aside the time to really play them, but hopefully soon. So Greenlight news. We recently, yesterday I think, had a bunch of new Greenlight titles, or a few days ago, with 37 out of 75 showing signs of Linux support. Is there anything in the list there that caught your eyes?
As usual with these flood, there really isn't.
I've seen a few things, like Knave, which is a GPL game, which is cool to see more of those, and 0K, which uses the same engine as Evolution, but I really enjoy 0K. I mean, it's total annihilation at its core, but it's got a lot of interesting modes and AI. And if you like RTS games, definitely check that out.
I kind of like that there were a bunch of flight sims in there, including a supposedly authentic, historically accurate World War I and II flight sim. As someone who enjoys flying biplanes in flight sims, that's exciting for me. The Maker's Eden, which we've mentioned a couple of times, has finally been greenlit. Hopefully we'll see some movement on that front soon. No idea at this stage when Act 1 is going to be released, but hopefully at some stage we'll get the developers back on the cast to join us again to tell us how things are going.
Yes, I'm surprised it took so long, while in the meantime non-games like Earth Year 2066, which by the way is pulled by now, got through greenlight. A proper legit game like Maker's Eden took so long.
Yeah, apparently they've been sitting on the edge for ages.
Bullcrap.
So yeah, it is disappointing to see games that do seem games that I find interesting not getting as much attention as things like that. Yeah.
You don't even have to find it interesting to admit that this is a proper, professionally done game compared to some of the crap that has been pushed through greenlight lately.
Yeah. Unpossible looks kind of neat. It's sort of very, very reminiscent of Prown, if you guys have heard of that.
Nope, so you would have to explain a bit more.
It's sort of like in Prown, you control a ball that rolls along this outside of this tube, I guess. And has geometry coming off the tube, which you have to, the only thing you can do is rotate left or rotate right, and you just avoid the obstacles. Impossible seems that sort of thing mixed with a kind of Tron aesthetic. So it's kind of like I wouldn't really call it a racing game, but it's kind of like a reflex thing where you've got to be able to quickly avoid the obstacles to reach a finish. And there's also Whitewash, which interesting looking puzzle game, which I think we may have mentioned previously.
Remind us.
You play as some kind of test subject in a sterile looking environment and have to fulfill a bunch of tasks that are sort of puzzly things. You have a glove that has a bunch of different abilities, like you can levitate some stuff and it can shoot, I think, and it's got interesting amount of heaps of lean when you're strafing, which I thought was kind of interesting feel. But yeah, I think Gaming on Linux did a rundown of it a little while back, which was what caught my eye.
So anything else on the list people have noticed?
That's about it for me. But one thing I did notice was that in the comments there seemed to be someone who was following along after someone else who had been asking for Linux support and saying that if there was no Linux support they would get a vote from them just to spite this other person. It's interesting to see that kind of I guess political behavior by people within the Greenlight community.
Nope, not political. Plain freaking stupid and being a dick. Which can happen in politics, but it's not exclusive to that. I mean,
I don't know.
That's just trolling. You don't need to pay any attention to that.
Oh, it is. It is most definitely trolling. But I don't know. I would call it political. But yeah, moving on to crowdfunding. We've only got one item here, which is Super Hot. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I read something on it. Looks kind of interesting. Kind of a take on bullet time, I guess you could call it, from some of the older games.
Like, quite literally, that's everything around you. Time itself only moves if you move.
Right. And this started as a 7-day FPS game for this year's 7-day FPS, I think. That's this kind of stylized first-person shooter, but yeah, as you say, time only moves forward when you move.
It was last year's 7-day FPS. That was a prototype back then, and they make it into a proper game now.
Oh yes, sorry. We haven't had one this year. Why is it 2014 already?
You're getting old.
Apparently. But yeah, it's got an interesting aesthetic to it. Be interesting to see how they take that and polish it up for the final game. The previous stuff looks pretty neat, and they've added some new weapons and new styles of play from the original prototype.
Just this GIF they have on the Kickstarter page where player character strafes between bullets while glass is slowly flying through the air like broken glass shards. It really has a lot going for it. And a bit more of an interesting concept, since everybody started copying bullet time after Max Payne did it so awesomely.
They've got looks like they've got a katana in there as well that you can use to chop bullets in half. They're not a high realism game, but yeah, it does look pretty neat. I'm gonna try and keep an eye on it. So on that note, we should close off the cast. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. It's been a pleasure. Bye.
See ya, guys.
See ya. Adios.